Forthright, fearless and feisty. That is how India will remember the country's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat. And for those who knew him personally and had the good fortune of working alongside him, with him they remember General Rawat as a true gentleman. A man who never forgot his roots, never missed an opportunity to help those who pinned hopes on him, and do it all with a smile on his face. General Bipin Rawat leaves behind a legacy that India will not forget for years to come, and boots that are going to be very hard to fill. And I would like to take this opportunity to express my condolences to the General, his family, and the families of all those 11 brave hearts who were killed in the IAF chopper crash just off the Wellington Staff College. And tonight, I want to introduce to you guests who are so esteemed, guests who have been working alongside, have seen General Bipin Rawat, and people who've known how the armed forces and the defense forces as a whole have worked, and what was the vision of General Bipin Rawat as the first Chief of Defence Staff. Joining me tonight is General Ved Malik, former Chief of Army, joining me live from Chandigarh. Also with me this evening is Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, Chief of the Air Staff, who's seen several summers and winters of officers who've taken over the helm of affairs after him. Also joining us is Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the ORF. First to you, General Bipin Malik. I want to ask you, General Bipin Rawat would have been your junior by many years, but as they say, an officer and a gentleman that he was. How do you remember your interactions with General Bipin Rawat?
Good evening, Navika. Firstly, I must say that yesterday was a very sad day when the Armed Forces family, they lost their serving head of the family. And indeed, a sad day for everyone, both retired as well as serving people. And I would like to, like you, to pay my homage to General Mrs. Rawat's family, also of the other soldiers whom we lost yesterday, both from the Army as well as from the Air Force. Well, Rawat, Bipin was a major, when I became the chief. And I'm talking of 1997, 98. He was about to become a lieutenant colonel at that time. And I didn't see him very much during my service earlier. But then subsequently, as he rose in the ranks, one kept hearing about him, kept seeing him also. And I would say that one of the extremely grounded persons, risen from the ground, as they say. His father was in the army, who retired as a deputy chief of the army staff. And so he rose from that most capable man, starting from his sword of honor when he passed out from the IMA, and then continued to rise and continued to acquaint himself, I would say professionally, one of the outstanding officers. And when I met him later on, he told me, he says, "Sir, you don't know much about me, but I know everything about you." And I have been, that was his remark when he met me, when he became the chief. Of course, I had congratulated him earlier, and I had mentioned it. So that was his first sentence when he spoke to me after he became the chief. And an outstanding military leader, I would say, professionally very competent, impeccable as far as his soldierly qualities are concerned. He could interact very easily and very competently from a Sipahi to our senior political leaders also. That was the range very articulate, believed in something, and then he followed it up. I mean, I found him a very determined soldier. So many times you would have seen he's been criticized also, but that never ruffled him. Absolutely. He continued to follow and continued to pursue what he thought was the right thing to do. So I would say that we got him as an army chief and then subsequently as a CDS at a very right time when India wanted to implement the reforms that we had been seeking for last decades together. And he was the right person for that. I found him the absolutely right person for that because these are difficult reforms that we are now looking for. Integration, jointmanship, you have to carry your Army, Navy, Air Force teams together, you have to carry your civilian colleagues together, and you have to carry the politicians together. Implementation is always more difficult than just planning. We may have been planning for these reforms, but the fact is that when it comes to implementation, then you know the difficulty, the glitches that they take place. There are some people who challenge you for whatever you want to do, etc. But he kept his aim quite clear. He was pursuing whatever he was mandated to do, and he was, I would say, pursuing it very, very competently. In addition to that, I can also mention that last 2 years that we have seen him as a CDS, he has led the armed forces team very well, whether it was confrontation with Pakistan, we carried out those Balakot strike as well as the surgical strike, or in a pandemic period when all the three first services had to work together and help the civil administration or China. He had a role in all these things, and he carried the team of the Army, Navy, and Air Force very, very competently. It's very unfortunate that we have lost him at a crucial time when the reforms are still going on. We have a lot more work to do as far as reforms are concerned. And so it's going to be a little difficult, I would say, for anybody who now fits in his, or he gets into his shoes.
Very right. Those are big boots to fill, and that is something, that is the biggest learning from this tragic loss of General Bipin Rawat. Fali Homi Major, I want to ask you this question. Many people talk about Bipin Rawat as somebody who put forth the reforms into motion. These ideas, these proposals have been on the table forever and ever since 71. And even after the Kargil war during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's tenure as Prime Minister. But it was really in the Modi era and under General Bipin Rawat that we've had a Chief of Defence Staff, and we've seen the wheels of motion as far as the theaterization drive to enhance the effectiveness of the armed forces that has really been put into motion. I want to ask you, Fali Homi Major, do you think this job, which is work in progress, will be able to recover from the loss of the driving force that really had the vision to carry this through?
At the outset, Navika, let me offer my deepest condolences to the late general, his late wife, their entire family, and indeed all those who lost their lives on board that helicopter and their families. It was a Black Wednesday and a very tragic accident. While General Malik just mentioned his association with General Bipin Rawat, I had met him just a couple of times when he was in service, and I think this was in the East, where I was the CMC East Attack Command. I think he was either a div commander or corps commander, I don't know, very briefly. But after he came to Delhi, and I happened to be in Delhi once during the Army Day, and that's the time I met him at the Army House for the reception that evening. And in lighter vein, he came out with a great thing. And he tells me, he says, sir, the Indian Army has given the Indian Air Force a major and a nayak. And the Air Force has not given anything in return to the Army. I think that was a great the little outburst from him. And that's how I remember him. And of course, later on, we met on a couple of occasions. And very recently, just about 2 weeks back, he was here in Bangalore for the Indian Air Force seminar for the 71 war. And we had a great interaction, including having dinner on the same table that evening. From what little I knew General Rawat, an amazing person who has risen on his own merit all the way up to the rank of the CDS. Now, as far as your questions are concerned, let me just put it this way, that he is the person who's kick-started the reforms to fall in place, and he had a huge task ahead of him, bringing in harmony and understanding between the three forces for the theaterization, integrated command, etc., etc. And I've heard many people say that, in the United States, to enact the theaterization and the CDS had to be, operationalized. My only wish is that whoever the successor to General Bipin Rawat is going to be, he and the entire military leadership, along with the political leadership, give the political leadership the options for these reforms to take place instead of it coming down top down. If we achieve that, that itself will be an indication of superb harmony and jointmanship between the three services. And my only hope is that the process has begun. It has been kick-started by him, which, as the General Malik mentioned, implementation is perhaps the most difficult thing to do in any new reform. And I think he has started it well. And I only hope that as we go along, the three services sit down, ponder over it, and reach the finest solution to achieve a very, harmonious higher defense management of this country, along with the political leadership, of course. Thank you.
Well, let me get in Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, you are a very astute observer of the defense forces. And I want to ask you, we are talking about succession. And when we talk about succession to General Bipin Rawat, everybody says it's a given that those are boots that are too large to fill. But Air Marshal Falihomi Major has touched upon the fact that harmony is something that will be so important as these reforms and the implementation of these reforms move forward. How do you see that process? Because there are a few rough edges, whether we like to admit it or not. What do you think General Bipin Rawat brought to the table, which will have to be necessarily taken forward by his successor, given the fact that this is still the process of implementation of a vision on the ground, which will have a few ups and downs, a few hiccups here and there. And therefore, nobody thought that General Bipin Rawat would not be in the saddle just so soon after the implementation. And do you think this entire process suffers a body blow at this time?
Navika, look, let me be blunt. I think General Rawat's death is a major loss. I don't think there are any two views about it. And the reason I say it, I cannot say that I knew him personally, but I had managed to interact with him on a couple of occasions, mostly official, and hear him speak. And the impression which I got of him with whatever little interaction I had were two things. One, he was a person who was not afraid to speak his mind. He was very blunt, he was very open, and sometimes it ruffled a lot of feathers. But he was a straight shooter, came straight from the hip. He didn't care about what anybody thought of what he said. One. And secondly, which was, I think, an even more important quality of him, he had this ability of thinking out of the box. With all due respect to the Air Chief Marshal and General Malik, who has been a senior colleague of mine in the ORF as well, and a man I respect immensely. Generally, you will see in the uniformed services a certain amount of regimentation of the mind. There is that ability to think out of the box, because when you are going in for this new theaterization, concept, you really need to shed all the old kind of calculations and think completely anew. And General Rawat had that ability. So yes, those will be big shoes to fill. But look, the one great thing about the Indian Armed Forces is that there have been many big shoes to fill, and they've always been filled. So I don't think I don't think there will be any real problems going forward as far as that aspect is concerned. Secondly, and more importantly, and I agree with what the Air Chief Marshal was saying, look, you have to do two things, and both of them are contradictory. The changes have to be done in harmony with all the three services being brought in together. But you will also have to break a lot of heads and do a lot of things which people will not like, because empires are built over a period of time. Nobody wants to make those kind of changes. There is institutional what is the correct word? I'm not getting it. But there is that institutional hesitation to move ahead with something new, with tectonic changes taking place. Now, when you say there will be a few hiccups, if there are just a few hiccups and few problems, I'll be very happy. I think there will be many hiccups and there'll be many problems going forward. And this is a process which is going to take a few years before it starts settling down. I would have imagined, and I think I'm not entirely wrong in that much of the legwork, at least at the conceptual level, has been already done by General Rawat, and now you had to start implementing it. So I think some of the tougher parts of how you are going to move forward has been done. That skeletal structure is more or less ready. I have immense faith on the competence and the professionalism of the people who will succeed him and the people who will be manning the three services to make sure that this process goes forward. Of course, there will be problems. Of course, there is going to be some degree of institutional inertia. A lot of those things will happen. But I think theaterization is a concept whose time has come, and nobody can stop it anymore. And some of the old, rivalries, some are, the inter-service rivalries are also there. There is a different way of thinking among the different services. I think all of that, where the field Air Chief Marshal says that you have to bring in a certain degree of harmony, I completely endorse that point. But at the same time, you will have to ruffle a lot of feathers going forward. So I think both of these things will go together. And I'm pretty confident that things will work out as we move forward. There will be problems, but you will have to surmount this problem. Those problems would have been there even if, General Rawat was around. It would have been probably easier for him to handle some of those problems, given the seniority, given the level of experience he had. But I'm sure whoever fills his shoes will be up to the task. I don't have many doubts about that.
Well, so let me ask General Malik. General Malik, I want to ask you, because this is especially a troubled time as far as our neighborhood is concerned. We're looking at Pakistan, we're looking at the Taliban in Afghanistan, we're also looking at an expansionist China. In the northeast, we've seen a few incidents happening in recent times. As far as all of these geopolitical, problems are concerned, there is so much of experience and there is so much of ground experience that General Bipin Rawat had in bringing expertise to the table. Does the timing of these problems and the demise of General Bipin Rawat, is that going to bring in a new set of issues on the table that will, even if we are not questioning the competence of the successor, but even in the short term, are these challenges that are going to weigh heavy on India's mind?
Navika, as far as the geopolitical situation is concerned, I don't think that is going to make much of a difference because all the three chiefs and their subordinates, they are well versed into what is happening. They know what is to be done and they have their operational plans, etc. So as far as the challenges on the borders, threats are concerned, I feel that all the three services are quite competent and they will be able to handle it. The problem is not that. The problem is our problem of the three services having to change over from, working in silos to working in an integrated manner where you have the maximum synergy available to you in terms of integrated forces as well as jointmanship. Now that is a deep-rooted issue which has been on the table for a very long time. And, as I remember Captain Littleheart once he said the most difficult thing in the armed forces is to take the past out of their mind. So that is a big challenge, and that is what I think we have to. Now, USA had a law passed under the Goldwater-Nichols Act, and that made it easier for them to get into the integration and jointmanship and have the kind of theater command that they have got today. All that was written down by the politicians and it was passed as a law. So it became easier for the armed forces to follow it. Unfortunately, we do not have that. We do not have much of a guidance except for the mandate that has been given to the CDS, which is there, and certain time frame also has been given. So as I said right in the beginning, that implementation is a big challenge. And these, you have to work yourself in a manner that you also have the harmony going, and yet, those minds which are rusted into their that old concepts and old ideas and all, we give it up to them. And it is going to be a slow process. There will be challenges, and you need a person who inspires confidence in the minds of the military as well as of this political leadership. A person who makes up his mind after consulting everybody, and then when he thinks that this is the best way to go ahead, then he follows that, he pursues that. Now that kind of a determination we had in General Rawat. And I'm hoping that whoever becomes the CDS next, he will also have the same kind of determination to not only to try and get everybody together, but if there are some resistance, he manages to overcome those resistance. Because objective is much more important than our single service aims and objectives. When we are talking about this. So that is an important issue. And I agree with Sushant Sareen that we will have challenges, but we have people who are capable of overcoming those challenges. And this is a time when you really require leadership of the manner in which one is able to get along well with the political authority as well as inspire confidence, not only in one service, his service, but all the three services together, so that all the reforms, some of them which have been initiated, and theaterization is a big challenge, no doubt about it. is probably going to take much longer, as I say it today. But ultimately, we have to go into that, and we may probably take a little more time, but ultimately we have to achieve that finally to get the maximum on each of these borders that we have got. Theaterization is more to do with, I would say, geographical part. But the whole idea of fighting together, working together, having the kind of command and control where you have the resources available to you for the task that has been given to you on each sector, that idea must sink in amongst the three services at the highest level.
Very well put, General Malik, and that's the question I want to take forward with Air Marshal Major. I want to ask you, you stressed upon and you brought in the variable called harmonious existence and harmonious working of the three services with the new approach and the reforms that have been brought in. Already we knew just before General Bipin Rawat took that there was not to the person maybe, but to the concept of the Chief of Defence Staff as a single control center. Aspiration at an aspirational level, each of the three services would have wanted their person, to be getting the top job. Do you think that particular race opens up prematurely now with the passing away of General Bipin Rawat, and how do you think that's likely to be handled both at a defense, security, strategic level and at a political level?
Navika, the selection of a chief of any service or the CDS is purely a government prerogative, based both on seniority and merit. And it's best left to the government for the CDS to be selected, or the chiefs, or whatever. Now, coming to the other issue of what General Sushant and General Malik referred to is, out-of-box thinking and harmony. There is one thing in the armed forces which needs to be, I wouldn't say corrected, but kept in mind always, and that is habit interference. Now, habit interference is directly related to modernization, to reforms and everything else. Because when the old has to give way to the new, there will always be a little bit of friction, both in the thinking and in the working of new systems. For example, you have an old aeroplane which has been with you for decades, and you got hundreds of technicians who have worked on that type of technology. When you get in a new technology in the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, anywhere, what happens is the reluctance of the old timer to adopt to new, better procedures. And anytime, the warfare, the nature of warfare is changing so rapidly in the world that I don't think we will go back to the days of, thousands of tanks rolling across the plains of Punjab and the deserts of Rajasthan, with troops moving across a few miles into enemy territory. I think the concept is changing, where we need to have integrated battle groups. And when I mean battle groups, I mean a joint integrated group of the Army, Navy, Air Force, depending on the situation. Now, that is the form of battle, of training and getting used to it, which will be a huge factor when we talk of theaterization. Now, in its original meaning, theaterization was always referred to, classical war situations. But in today's world, that is far and few in between. We don't know if we'll ever see a classical war. But the same integrated concept, which means we will have to be lean, mean, and perhaps downsize a hell of a lot for this to achieve this with better equipment, better technology, and diversifying into many other fields of warfare, which will be barriers to cross as we go along, and it's very difficult to predict what kind of warfare will, obtain, say, 20, 15 or 20 years away from us. Now, this is where I think the integration will be very, very important between the three services to execute specific tasks in specific areas. This is where a lot of learning will have to take place, and that learning will have to be joint and very well orchestrated by the military leadership of all three services.
Well, Sushant Sareen, of course, we are looking at the road ahead. But before we really talk about the succession plan, there refuses, what refuses to die down are the conspiracy theories that are swirling around. There have been questions about the Mi-17s, their safety. Some people say that VVIPs have always flown it. Then there are the visuals that have come in where you can see the chopper just moving in a straight line, doesn't seem to be in any trouble, at least in the visual clip that has been found. Do you think there is any credence to these conspiracy theories, or with the statement of the Raksha Mantri, these should be given a silent burial, or do you think these questions are pertinent to ask at this time?
Look, India being India, there's just so much noise. And suddenly everybody is a helicopter pilot. If a plane falls, everybody is a fighter pilot. If a tank goes awry, everybody is an armored corps officer. Everybody knows how to fire an artillery gun. Everybody knows which artillery gun works best in which terrain. So this noise will happen. I think it is important, especially for channels like yours, which are widely watched, to cut out this noise. Okay, let me just say, if you're talking about possibilities, there's a possibility of everything. There's a possibility that a missile came out of nowhere and took the aeroplane off. There's a possibility of every possible thing, right? But the armed forces have a way of going about things. An accident has happened. As of now, it is very clear it's an accident. We don't know what the reason for it is. Whether this was an accident, it was not an accident. They are going to hold an inquiry. These guys will go to the bottom of the issue and find out what exactly went wrong. I think we should wait for that. Part of our problem is that apart from 24/7 television channels, there is like 365 days, everybody is an expert, for example, on Twitter, on Facebook. Everybody comes up with conspiracy theories. Some clip taken out from somewhere and suddenly, you start spinning all sorts of yarns. Hang on, wait, let the inquiry happen. They will come out with all the facts. To say that, there was some conspiracy, somebody's trying to do something, frankly, I find it distasteful. I find it utter nonsense. Let the reports come out, let the investigation be complete, and we'll get to know what exactly happened. If there was a conspiracy angle, even that will come out. If there wasn't, it was an accident, we'll find out why the accident happened. Was it some kind of a technical failure? Was it some kind of a misjudgment by the pilot, which is unlikely because those pilots are very highly trained. They keep flying over that terrain. Was it something else? Was it weather related? I don't know. You can speculate till the cows come home. And I think, it insults the memories of the people who died when you indulge in these kind of, and it's a torture for the families of, those men who have died. It's a torture for them. I don't know what kind of brainless people come up with these kind of theories. I don't know, yaar. It just leaves a very bad taste in the mouth. That's all I can say. I think we should wait. We should hold our horses. I think the media must give whatever information is coming. But for a lot of channels to air, I got a call from somebody, I will not name that channel. Attack हो गया, आपको पता है attack हो गया है? I said attack हो गया, किसके ऊपर attack हो गया? वो helicopter गिरा दिया है. I said कहाँ पर गिरा दिया है? I didn't even know, I was traveling. I said, I don't know. Maybe, maybe General Rawat was on the China border or on the Pakistan border and some incident has happened out there and then, all hell will break loose. So I said, tell me without getting, hysterical, what exactly happened. So he told me that the plane was taking off and going to the Defence Staff College. I said, yaar, who will attack it out there? For God's sake. But suddenly wo attack ho gaya hai. It's horrifying, the way this thing is done.
Well, I know, in the days of social media, in the days of digital media, in the days of YouTube videos and 24/7 channels, it's a tightrope walk on speculation. But I just want to dwell on one other issue, and General Malik, I want your views on it. Just as the Constitution lays down in the case of a political leader or an office that is held by a political leader, if something happens to them, there is a chain of command because there is no vacuum. Do you think in the situation of the Chief of Defence Staff, which was the first time anybody occupied that office was General Bipin Rawat, do you think there is an automatic system that should be in place because vacuum in a high office of that kind could have its own fallouts? How do you think this should be structured?
Navika, there is never any vacuum. All our subordinates are trained to take over the responsibilities. As far as the CDS headquarters Integrated Defence Staff is concerned, there is a CISC who is there. And the normal routine work that will carry on, that will go on. And as far as the other three chiefs are there, they are members of the Chiefs of Staff Committee, which is headed by the CDS. So whoever is the senior most chief, he officiates as the in place of CDS. And I think everybody has to wait till political authority, they make up their mind, and then they appoint a CDS. And one of the questions that you had been asking earlier, today CDS is open to all three services. So it's not a question of army or anybody else. It's a question of finding the most competent, professionally competent person, finding a person who can lead the three services together properly, and finding a person who can have an harmonious relationship not only amongst the three services, but also along with the political authority and carrying these reforms forward, which have been indicated. So that is the kind of a person, and I'm sure there are enough people. There are three chiefs. There are then other three staff generals who are very senior. The political authority, it is their prerogative, and they will be able to find one. And what is more important is that it should not be a politically biased person, but it should be somebody who comes up on the basis of his professional competence, and as I said, who can inspire confidence in all three services and who can get people along with him.
Very, very important point. Sushant wants to come in. Yes, Sushant.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask General Malik or Air Chief Marshal Major a question. When we are discussing about the succession, see, one is the fact that, in General Rawat's case, it was relatively easier because he was the senior most, who was then elevated to the rank of the CDS. Today, if you pick up anybody other than the three serving chiefs, aren't you technically putting a person who's junior to them in a position which is technically senior to them? So one, how will that play out? Number two, if you have to take from within the service chiefs, I would then imagine that your choice is going to be limited from the three current serving chiefs. What do the two former chiefs say about that? Because it's just a technical question. How do you elevate somebody junior into a senior position with senior people still serving below him? I don't know how that will work.
Well, Air Chief Marshal Fali Major first, and then I'll come to you, General Malik.
Sushant, succession, as I had mentioned earlier, especially for a key appointment like the CDS, will be a government prerogative. Now, we must remember one thing, that starting from the commanders-in-chief of commands of the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, and upwards, the chiefs and the CDS, they have reached that position because of what they've achieved in their service career over however many years, which means each one of them is capable and competent to take over in the next rank. Now, if that be the case, what you're referring to perhaps are, in case somebody very junior is picked up, there would be supersessions. Am I right? That's what you mean. And how will that be taken in the service?
That's right.
Well, there have been supersessions in the services earlier, and the Army, Navy, and the Air Force have continued without any hassles earlier. So I suppose if that were to happen, the armed forces will perhaps have to accept it. But in my personal opinion, when we talk of supersessions for the rank of a CDS, I don't think it would be such a deep selection. I may be wrong in my assumption. It wouldn't be such a deep selection. I don't think so.
General Malik, you agree with Fali Homi Major?
A deep selection always creates problems. There is no doubt about it. And therefore, as far as possible, it should be kept at a shallow level. I have seen some deep selections in other democratic countries. They've created problems. Pakistan, in any case, is always in trouble because of such things that keep happening there. But in our services, firstly, of course, all the three services, they accept whatever is political authority mandates. We have seen a few supersessions earlier also, and we've not had any big problem. But I agree with Air Chief Marshal Major that as far as possible, it should be kept at a very shallow level and not gone so deep that it creates problems in command and control.
Well, I'm glad we get the luxury of your outlook at this point in time, because these are many of the questions, even as we are trying to come to terms with the departure of General Bipin Rawat, his wife, and the 11 soldiers who've lost their lives in this very unfortunate air crash. The fact of the matter is that looking ahead is something that has always been the norm, especially in the defense forces. And you've helped us look forward even at a time when we are paying a tribute to General Bipin Rawat. Before I wrap up the show, I just want to ask both of you, General Malik and Air Marshal Fali Major, what would be your parting words in tribute to General Bipin Rawat?
I think the armed forces, I would say the whole nation will remember him as a very dynamic person, and dynamic who had a task in hand, and he carried out that task in a very professional manner. He was articulate. He minced no words. When he had to do something, he went ahead. So I think the nation will remember him as a great soldier, a great military leader, for the kind of work that he did, both while in junior ranks as well as, of course, in the senior most rank of the CDS. Being the first CDS of the nation is a great honor. It was a great privilege, and I think he executed that extremely well.
Air Marshal Major?
And Navika, he is perhaps the only man in uniform in the country who's reached this iconic rank of the Chief of Defense Staff. And he will be remembered by the country for his tremendous effort in bringing about these reforms and these changes, which he went about doing it very diligently and very, very sincerely. It is unfortunate that he passed away before it could be completed. And all I need to say is, may his soul rest in peace, and like a good soldier, may he sleep well.
May he sleep well. An officer, a gentleman, a man who brought in reforms, and a man who did it smilingly. And for us in the media, a man who was always there, talking, saying it as it were, and being very, very frank about it. Thank you very much, Air Marshal Fali Homi Major, General Ved Malik and Sushant Sareen for joining me on this very special episode. And I leave you with these images of General Bipin Rawat dancing, smiling with his batchmates, a video just a few months old.
Can I do it?